Hello everyone, welcome back to What If Ash Was Like Paul. And this part took a while to come out because I was busy with stuff, but now that I'm not busy, I'm just gonna make it. And by the time that this video is gonna come out on YouTube, or wherever it comes out, it will be Mother's Day, but I've recorded it prior, just for your information. So, May would still make her first Pokeblock, and she would still win her first contest, as these episodes would still go the same other than the Groudon episode, where Archie would still have the red orb, and would still have Groudon, as Maxie would still have the blue orb and Kyogre, as Shelby would sneak in to try and get Kyogre and activate it, as Ash and Lance would meet, but their interaction would be different, as Ash was a champion of the Silver Conference and he had never met Lance before, as in this story no Red Gyarados stuff happened. So the Red Orb and Blue Orb would still control both Ash and Ash and Archie, my mistake, as Kyogre and Groudon would battle, as Out would then cause for the sun being extra warm and harsh, as the battle will commence, as they would have a little bit of a good scuffle for a while, and something major would happen when Groudon would blast a Solar Beam, which would knock back Kyogre for super effective damage. But after this moment, they would then be put back into where they were supposed to be thanks to the orbs. So after this event, Ash should go to Mosdeep City, where when he arrived, he would decide to train Celia for the battle, as he hadn't used it in a while and it was super effective against Solrock and Lunatone, as he heard that those were the main Pokemon of Tantalizer, as he would use an Ice Ball which would barely do anything to Venusaur, as Venusaur would then use a Vine Whip to try and train its reflexes, and in the heat of the moment it would learn an Aqua Jet and escape from the Vine Whip and hit Venusaur, which would barely do anything, but this had been valuable experience for Celia. They had learned what Ash was excited for, a new move, and so he had returned both Pokemon. So then the events of the Mosdeep Gym would happen, where Ash would make his way inside and battle Tantalizer. This would be Sceptile Celia versus Lunatone and Solrock. Sceptile would quickly go in for a Leaf Blade on Solrock, as Lunatone would go for a Psychic on both of Ash's Pokemon, and use Psychic to hit both of Ash's Pokemon all over the battlefield, as it would intensify the attack and hurt the Pokemon even more. As eventually, Ash's Pokemon Celia and Sceptile would land both a Hydro Pump and Solar Beam on Solrock, and because Light Screen had blocked the attacks like how it does in the anime, even though it doesn't do that in the games, it just has special attacks, both the moves wouldn't hit Lunatone and would instead hit Solrock, which would knock out Solrock, as they would then off guard Lunatone and finish it off with Leaf Blade and Aqua Jet respectively, as Ash would turn both Pokemon, as Tantalizer would then congratulate Ash on the battle, saying that they knew Ash was strong but I didn't know it would go this fast, as they give him the badge. As now for the events where Drake would invite Ash to the ship to battle. Drake, after seeing the Johto League, aka the Silver Conference, had already been interested in Ash, so he decided to invite Ash where Ash was in a late stage in his journey, where he would be able to at least stand in the same battlefield as Drake and give him at least a bit of a challenge, as Drake would want to battle Ash, as it would be Venusaur versus Shelgon. Drake would say that Shelgon was a mid-level Pokemon of his that would probably be suited for Venusaur, and Ash would say that he didn't have any problem with that, as it would be Shelgon against Venusaur, as Shelgon would use a Dragon Claw to knock back Venusaur. Venusaur would hold it in place and squeeze it with a Vine Whip, as the Vine Whips would hold it in place for a flurry of Razor Leafs, as this would then knock back Shelgon, as Shelgon would then use a Dragon Breath, which would be avoided, as Venusaur would then charge up a Solar Beam and launch a Solar Beam, which would then knock back Shelgon for a decent chunk of damage, as Shelgon would then go for a Dragon Rush, which would knock back Venusaur, as Venusaur would then use Razor Leaf, which would barrage Shelgon and knock it back for a decent chunk of damage, as it was a critical hit, as then they'd get back into positions, as Shelgon would receive a lot of Sludge Bombs, which would poison it, as it would then respond with Dragon Breath, which would paralyze Venusaur, as it would then hit Venusaur with a Dragon Rush, as Venusaur would then respond with Solar Beam, as Venusaur will be the only one left standing after this explosion, as Flygon would be sent in, as Venusaur would then immediately charge the Solar Beam in anticipation for this, or would then be hit swiftly by a Dragon Pulse, as then it would launch a Solar Beam anyway, which would do a decent chunk of damage, but not as much as Ash was hoping for, as Venusaur was tired and weakened by Shelgon, and Flygon would then stop Venusaur and knock it out with a Flamethrower, as Ash would then send in Celio against Flygon, as Celio would then go for an Ice Ball, which would do a decent chunk of damage because it was super effective, but it wouldn't do nearly as much as Ash was hoping for, because of the strength advantage, the strength difference between Flygon and Celio, as Celio would then be hit by an Earthquake, as this would do a lot, as Celio would then respond with an Ice Beam, which would seemingly freeze Flygon, but the ice would just melt off Flygon's skin as it was too strong, as Flygon would then launch a Flamethrower, which would do a lot of damage and would seemingly knock out Celio, as Celio would then, by its will, begin to glow, as it would stand up and begin to change into Walrein, as when it was fully evolved, it would go for an Aqua Jet, but it would cloak the Aqua Jet in ice, as this would do a decent chunk of damage to Flygon, as Flygon would then stand up and respond with a Dragon Pulse, which would knock back Walrein, as with the ice Aqua Jet, it would clash with Flygon's Dragon Claw, as then, before both moves would collide and cause irreparable damage to the ship, a roaring moon would intercept both moves and knock back both Pokemon by just its presence, as then a trainer would get in between both Flygon and Walrein, as he would say that his name was Aiden and that he was Drake's nephew, and that Drake and Ash had been doing too much damage to the ship during their battle, and that the battle had to be stopped. And Ash would ask who this guy is, and then Aiden would say that he already said his name and would ask if Ash was a bit slow, but then Ash would say he didn't have to be such a jerk about it and that he meant his background. Aiden would then say that he was trained by Drake since he was young, and that he was quite a strong trainer, and Ash shouldn't be even on the ship with Drake or him, as he would just cause a lot of damage and just disturbed everyone on the ship because they were worried for it, as this would annoy Ash because Aiden was being rude, and Aiden would be asked by Ash who he was, and even though he was some family member of Drake and that he had gotten ahead in life, he should be treating everybody like he's better than everyone. And Aiden would reply that he got a rare Salamence called Roaring Moon from Paldea that was extremely powerful, and that he, like he said earlier, was trained since he was a kid and was on Elite Four level, if not Champion level, and that Ash shouldn't be talking to him in such a way because he was far above Ash, and Ash was far insignificant to him. This would annoy Ash, as then he would say that if he wasn't Drake's nephew, he would be a nobody. As when Ash walked up to Aiden, Aiden would ask who the hell Ash was anyway, and that he wasn't anybody of note, and all he did was just win some tournament in some region that he could easily solo with just his weakest Pokemon. As Ash would say that he had to work for everything that he has, and that everything that Aiden has was just served on a silver platter, so he can't talk about anything or any achievements. As then both trainers would get annoyed and decide to battle, as would then be Aiden versus Ash. Aiden would send out his weakest Pokemon, a shiny Kingdra, as Ash would send out one of his strongest, being Sceptile. A Sceptile would go for a Leaf Blade immediately, one of its strongest moves, as Ash was annoyed by Aiden, but this would barely do anything to Kingdra. His Kingdra would then smirk and just land an Ice Beam, which would immediately incapacitate Sceptile. As Sceptile was in critical condition and needed medical help immediately, as Ash would melt the ice off of Sceptile using Magcargo, as he would then carry Sceptile all the way to the medical room within the docks, with May and Max who were concerned following behind him. He would then find the medical room and put Sceptile down, as the medic would then go on to heal Sceptile with everything he had. A few hours later, Sceptile would be fit enough to stand up, as it would thank the medic in Pokemon Talk, as then when Ash went to check on his Pokemon, when he looked into the eye of Sceptile, he would see rage, sadness, and the loss of confidence. As Ash would know immediately, or he thought he knew what had happened. So when Ash and Sceptile went to confront Aiden again, May had went away, as she didn't want to get him in between the three. As then Aiden would say, that is what happens when somebody as inexperienced and weak as Ash steps up against somebody as experienced and powerful as Aiden, and that Ash shouldn't even be on the same battlefield as Aiden, as he would just get himself and his Pokemon hurt, and that Ash is probably 10 years old and that he is 15 and he is older than him, and that he's been doing this since he was 5 for 10 years, pretty much Ash's entire life, and that Ash should just stay away from anybody Elite Four or Champion level or as strong as him or his uncle, and that Drake had went away to go and do more important things than wait for some child who just got humbled by his nephew. As then Ash would get annoyed, but he would understand what Drake was saying and would understand that he was beaten, so he would just stand there and just take the heat by by Aiden. As he would return Sceptile, as Aiden would then walk up to Ash and would say that there was nothing remarkable about him, and that he will never be on the same level as the Elite Four, him, or any champion, and that he should just give up, because he'll just get hurt along the way and make himself look like the bumbling fool that he is, as he would then walk away. Ash would be angry, as he would then send out Swellow and know that he needed to fly away, knowing that nobody was going to get him back to the mainland, as May and Max would also show up, knowing that they needed to fly away on Swellow as well, as Swellow would then allow all three of them on his back, as he would then use a quick attack to soar through the skies, as he would then make his way onto the mainland, as May would battle against this guy. I forgot his name. He was annoying. I didn't like him. and she would still win the tournament unbeaten. And now Ash would be into top in the city, where him, May, and Max would arrive and immediately walk into the gym after healing his Pokemon. Ash would meet Juan, as he would greet Juan, and Juan would also greet him, as Juan would recognize him from the Silver Conference and from the Indigo Conference, and he would say that he knew how strong Ash was and that he wasn't going to hold back against Ash. As May and Max would stand aside as round 1 would begin, being double battles, as Ash would use Sceptile and Swallow against Groudon and Lapras. Lapras would be hit by only one measly Leaf Blade from Sceptile, as Sceptile's head wasn't in the game after its loss, but Ash thought he understood what was going on and thought that Sceptile was just a little bit angry and that it was ready for any battle. As he was wrong, as when the move hits, this would barely do anything to Lapras, as Lapras would just respond with a blizzard which would leave Sceptile almost incapacitated, as Sceptile would still have that look in its face, as Ash would notice this, but wouldn't think much of it, as he would then realize that Sceptile didn't want to battle, as he would then return Sceptile, as then Juan would say that it was a forfeit, as the referee would then disqualify Sceptile, as then it would be Swallow up against Groudon and Lapras on its own, as Swallow would then go for an Aerial Ace which would knock back Lapras, as then Swallow would be hit by a Crab Hammer which would knock it down, as then it would break its limits, as it would use quick attacks everywhere all over the battlefield, as it would go as fast as it could, as there would be after images even around the battlefield, as Swallow was going that fast, as Swallow would be trying to confuse its opponents, trying its best to win. But during the battle, when Swallow went for a fully charged up Aerial Ace, it would knock back Lapras for a decent chunk of damage, as it would then go for a Groudon and hit it with an Aerial Ace, as this would do a lot of damage, but then Lapras would be able to recover and finish off Swallow with a Blizzard, as then Juan would return both of his Pokemon and would say that he was incredibly disappointed by Ash's performance, and that he knew that and that he thought that Ash could do better, and that he expects to see more the next battle that they have, as Ash would then leave. And that when Ash left the gym, he would understand what would happen against Aiden, as he would send out Sceptile, and he would talk to it about how he had lost many times, as Sceptile would still have the look on its face, as Ash would then bring up a big example being his Indigo League loss, where he had worked so hard and that he was almost on the top of his game and that he was incredibly powerful, but he had been stopped by a superior trainer. He was much more intelligent and a better trainer, and that he wasn't quite ready to win yet, and that he had been humbled by that experience and it had reformed him, and that he didn't let the loss define him. But Sceptile still won't be convinced, and before Ash could deploy a second tactic, Venusaur would send itself out of its pool. Being Sceptile's mentor, Sceptile would immediately pay attention to this, as its mentor wanted to talk to it. Venusaur would then tell Sceptile in Pokemon Talk that it had come so far on the Trico trying to save the dying tree, and that Sceptile was incredibly powerful, and that it has only been improving and improving, and that the loss against the Kingdra that belonged to Aiden was just a bump in the road, and that Aiden and Kingdra were far more experienced, and that there was nothing Sceptile could have really done, and that Sceptile was a strong Pokemon in its own right, and that when it was Sceptile's level of experience, it was nowhere near the level that Sceptile is at, and that Sceptile is incredibly powerful and has so much more potential that it realizes, and that if it and Venusaur and Ash and all of the rest of the team can train and just focus on becoming stronger, it will beat Aiden and Kingdra when they come across them again. As after saying a few more things to Sceptile, Sceptile will be motivated and would realize what it needed to do, that it needed to win Ash the battle against Juan and do its best, and that it can go and beat Aiden and Kingdra. As then after this, Venusaur would smile at its pupil, as then they would discuss things in Pokemon Talk, as they would then decide to battle and have a light spar, as the invigorated Sceptile will go for a Leaf Blade, which would knock back Venusaur, as Venusaur would then use Sludge Bombs, which would knock back Sceptile, as the remaining Sludge Bombs would be slashed into pieces by Sceptile's Leaf Blade, as then Sceptile would then close in with the Leaf Blades, as it would then be pushed back by the more experienced Venusaur, as then they would then begin to charge Solar Beam respectively, as both moves would begin to clash together. As before, as when they clashed, it would cause a massive explosion. As the next day, after healing, Ash was ready to battle, as it would then be Sceptile and Swallow against Groudon and Lapras again, as one would ask if Ash was ready to fight with Sceptile or even ready to battle him, as Ash would say that this time him and Sceptile were going to win and do their best. One would say that he was going to use the same team of Pokemon as he was confident that they could win, as it would then be Sceptile against the two Pokemon with Swallow, as it would then immediately rush Lapras with the Leaf Blade with amazing speed, which would immediately knock out Lapras, as the confidence and power within Sceptile had been amped after the sparring session and after the pep talk had been given, as then it would look towards its only target, as it would then finish off with a magical leaf, or so it seemed, as then before Groudon could stand right back up, it would be finished off by by an aerial ace. As then round 2 would begin, as the confident Sceptile would be sent out to go up against Kingdra, as Sceptile would then use Leaf Blade on Kingdra, which Kingdra would withstand, as Kingdra was stronger than Lapras and Groudon, as one would say that Sceptile was strong, but Kingdra was even stronger, and that the first two Pokemon that he used were just a teaser for his true power, as he would then launch a flamethrower from Kingdra onto Sceptile, which would do a lot of damage, as then Sceptile would launch Magical Leaf, as then during the Magical Leaf, which would hit Kingdra gradually and distract it would launch a Solar Beam, which would finish off Kingdra, as then Juan would admit that he was impressed by the strength of Sceptile, and that Sceptile was far stronger than before after its pitiful performance the last time that they battled. As then Juan would send out his Walrein, as Walrein would immediately go for an Ice Beam, which would freeze the arm of Sceptile, as Sceptile with one arm would hit a Leaf Blade, which would knock back Walrein, as Walrein would then hit with an Ice Ball, as then Sceptile would respond with a Magic Leaf, which would do a lot of damage, as Sceptile would then go for a Leaf Blade, which would be quickly avoided by the more experienced Walrein, as Walrein would then use a nice fan, which would freeze even more of Sceptile's body and seemingly knock it out. As then, it would seem that it was over, And Juan would say that he was a bit disappointed and that Sceptile maybe was as weak as he thought it was and as disappointed as he thought it was, as then its eye would glow, as all the ice on it would immediately dissipate, as an overgrown nature-like aura would appear around it, as it would stand up, as Overgrow had awakened, as it would then immediately go for a Leaf Blade, which would knock down Wolverine, as Wolverine would stand up, as it would go for an Ice Ball, which would be tanked by Sceptile, as Sceptile would then go for a Solar Beam, as Wolverine used a Blizzard, as this would knock out both Pokemon. As then Ash would send out his task Pokemon to go up against Juan's Milotic, as Milotic would hit with an Iron Tail, which would knock back Venusaur for a lot of damage, as Venusaur then responded with a Razor Leaf, which would cut Milotic a lot, as Milotic would then use Recover to regenerate, as Ash would be surprised that knew this move, but would still be confident in his abilities, as then Milotic would go for an Ice Beam, which would knock back Venusaur, as Venusaur would then use Vine Whips to speed on Milotic, as then Milotic would then use a Recover, but this would then allow Milotic to just sneak past the Vine Whips and then barrage it with a High Pump. Instead, this would knock back Venusaur. Instead, Venusaur would then come back and respond with Sludge Bombs, which would poison Milotic, as Milotic would then go back into its battle position and would try to recover health, as this would only recover health but not remove its status effect. As then Venusaur will get back into its battle position as well, as it would then take an Iron Tail by Milotic, as this would then lower the defense of Venusaur, as Venusaur would then beat on Milotic with its Vine Whips, as then Milotic would then use a Rip, would then use Recover to recover some health, as it would then slide past the Vine Whips once again and use an Iron Tail once again to lower the defense of Venusaur once again, as Venusaur would then land back onto the floor, as they then be back into both of their battle positions. So then Juan would say that usually when challengers battle his Milotic barely uses any of its power, approximately 20% of its true power. Depending on the trainer, it can even use 10 or 5%. But now against Ash, Milotic is finally going to be able to use its 100% true power. As then, Milotic would then be barraged by a Sludge Bomb, which will knock it back, as it would then use Recover. As then, it would then use an Ice Beam, which will freeze half of Venusaur's body. As then, it would then be a clash between Ice Beam and Solar Beam, as this clash would be intense, as both Pokemon would put their all into both beams, but eventually Venusaur would break its limits and overpower Milotic, as the sheer power of its Solar Beam would even send its killing back, as it would finish off Milotic with a Solar Beam and emerge victorious, as then Ash would return it. As then Juan would say that Ash had proved him wrong and shown why he had won the Silver Conference, as Juan would say that he believes that Ash can win the Evergrande Conference and can do very well and become an incredibly powerful trainer, that he has a very bright future in the Pokemon training business. As then he would give Ash his badge and say that Ash needs to train for the next conference, as will be in a few months, as Ash would then say that he will train, and Juan was a big battle, as they would then pay their respects to each other's trainers. And I think this is where I should leave it. I'm sorry if I didn't talk or if I started a lot. Like, I haven't done this for like 2 months. I've been a bit rusty, but the next video is going to be a lot better. So I'm going to try and make it as better as it can be. I'm going to try and make it as good as it can be. And I'm going to be back, and it's going to be a lot sooner than the wait between the Mount Silver What If and this one. Anyway guys, see you guys later, bye.